Okay, an animation. We made an animation based on the subject that we're moving on to now, which is the future of Converge, because that was one of the key areas of the report. Really was about the future of Converge. Where might it go? It's been raised in lots of ways today, but this animation begins a conversation. I'm going to then just talk for a few minutes about possible futures for Converge, setting out a kind of possible agendas, and then Harriet will say a bit more about that and develop that. There'll be a coffee break for you to get a chance to think about, well, where would you like to see this organisation going? And that'll be followed by Matthew and others leading a kind of a panel talking about where we would want Converge to develop in the future. So, to begin with, we carry on with an animation made by Jason Curley in Edinburgh. Go. Converge began with a simple idea: to offer free educational opportunities in a university to local people with mental ill health, and to involve university students in the teaching. We now offer courses from drama to creative writing to research methods at York St John University and Northumbria University. We work with people as students, focusing on learning and their aspirations for the future and not on the mental health issue.
Over 2021, we asked the people who use Converge to tell us about their experiences. We've learnt a lot, especially about how Converge helps universities and their stakeholders to fulfil a wide range of strategic goals, as well as the benefits for university students and community members.
University students told us they gained unique benefits beyond what was on offer to them within their course.
I'm at such a prestigious drama school on a prestigious course because I talked about Converge so much during my interviews and what I learned from these people and working with quote-unquote vulnerable people and me teaching them and them teaching me.
It's a job, but more important than that, I've made friends. I've got my self-esteem back. I've got my love of teaching back, which I never thought I'd be able to do again.
The Converge model has helped our universities to fulfil our strategic aims around social justice and community engagement.
Converge is a really good enactment of social justice. It's going beyond the rhetoric and it's doing actual work with communities. I think they've thought very carefully about the power relations and how they can work in partnership.
It's a unique thing within a university facility, with university students and Converge students coming together as well. And it's like a symbiosis of two parties, which I think is better for both people.
The Converge model supports strategic partnerships and collaboration both within the university and with key stakeholders.
From connecting over Converge, I've been talking a lot about other collaborations with lecturers and other ways of working together on bridging the gap between disciplines.
I think Converge sits really well with the whole transforming community mental health services agenda because it's place-based, it's in a university, it's recovery-focused.
This research has shown us how far-reaching the benefits of the Converge model are to universities and health providers, from student progression to community engagement to strategic partnerships. We would love to grow this model with other places of learning. Join us if you would too. Thank you. Thank you for that animation, which says some interesting things about Converge and its development. I want to speak for a few minutes now about the possible futures of Converge and what may be possible. But firstly, like I did this morning, I'd quite like to set out what are the non-negotiables, what we would not be prepared to move on in terms of the development of Converge. Everything else is up for grabs, but there are non-negotiables. One non-negotiable is that people who come to Converge come as students, and that it takes place in a university, and that we involve university students in Converge throughout. That's the key model. Those are the non-negotiables. But everything else is in a way up for grabs and up for development. What Converge, I think, crucially has shown is the potential of a university to work in this way. So there's all sorts of possibilities. And the research and the evaluation suggested 6 of those ways of development. And I'm going to share those with you now. We've got 6 areas for development. Well, the first is to further embed Converge in the 2 universities in which it is currently in existence. Here at York St John, and there's still a lot more work to be done, and at Northumbria too. Because there are 3 roles for a university. One is to teach, so we need to involve our students in all sorts of ways, and there's lots of new ways of developing that. I've been talking to the nursing school recently about how students can get involved in proper kind of ways, and OT students as well, more thoroughly than they do at the moment. There have been some ideas that have come up today. I was struck by one from Storing Sheffield about a particular way of working that we might well take on here. So embedding Converge in the student life, both here and Northumbria is the first thing. Embedding Converge in research is the second thing, and we have here a strong evaluation and research team, but open for growth and development, and we certainly want to do that. It was great to see the McPinn Foundation from London, a kind of similar organisation, contributing this morning. So we need to develop in that area and work closely with the Institute for Social Justice, to which Converge very much aligns itself inside the university. Those are 2 key areas, of course, of university, and the other areas, of course, civic engagement. And I'll come on to that in terms of different audiences and different types of courses. So we need to embed ourselves at York St John and Northumbria more strongly, so that the roots are so strong that no kind of changes can destroy them. Secondly, and it's great to have key people here, Steve and Joe and so on, is to embed Converge more firmly into the city. And everything that is available in the city, from Make It York and from the art gallery and so on, so that we're very much part of the cultural and educational life of the city. And we're doing that in different kinds of ways. We're working in the hospital more and more, the local mental health hospital, staging exhibitions there and workshops and so on. And the dream is for me that the journey begins there for some people and it ends up here, or it ends up in town, you know, at the art gallery or at the Theatre Royal in some way, that we open up the city, very much aligned with what's called connecting our city, which is a key idea in York. So that's the second development. Those are ones in York. There's probably something similar in Northumbria too that talked to Ali about. The third is about developing new courses and activities, and we asked people to talk about what kinds of, in the research, what kinds of courses would you like to see developed? And here's a list of all sorts of possibilities in the arts, in the humanities, in social sciences, STEM subjects, physical health, health and social care, and other things like gardening, business, entrepreneurship, technology. All of that is possible. It depends a bit on the university, of course, and the university's programs. And we've just got some money from a fund in York to work closely with York University, developing some new courses, the first of which is going to be philosophy. Elaine is working on that. But we've got other plans in terms of offering other kinds of courses that York University would be able to offer better than we could here. So we're talking to York University students at the moment about developing that. That'll enable us to develop more courses. We're going to be able to develop more courses online, and that's where we're working with Northumbria to do that, so that we can offer what they have as well as what we have online. And there's all sorts of possibilities for growth there and development. And we'll need to talk to people about what particular thing is of most interest to them. We move on to the next kind of possibility of growth for Converge, and that's about geographic expansion. So that's come up a few times this morning. The model is there. It's been successful in 2 cities. There are opportunities if universities around the country wish to adopt the model. Of course, there are opportunities to do that. There are a number of inhibitions, of course. One is that we need to maintain the ethos of Converge, the way it's modeled effectively, and we need to be able to defend that and protect it. So, but that's possible, and we've worked through that in Northumbria University, and that's certainly possible. The other thing that's as much a challenge is that if we move into another city, of course, we are a competitor. There's a kind of competition in another city because there are already providers of various sorts, and that's something to be very aware of and sensitive about. So there are opportunities for expansion in other universities, but it's a challenge, it's a considerable challenge. Number 5, online expansion, which I've mentioned a bit. Helen and Emma lead the Converge Connected courses. So out of COVID and so on, we've really developed our online provision, and we're going to continue doing that. So these are all possibilities. Number 5, online expansion. And the 6th is probably the most challenging, and that is different audiences, if you like, or different participant groups. And so we have a list of some of those possibilities there. Wrong place, there we are. So different diagnostic groupings, for example, people with learning disabilities, dementia, do a little bit of work in the hospital in this area, but not a great deal. Multiple needs, people with long COVID, or those without identified mental health issues, but low in confidence. Different demographic groupings, for example, people under the age of 18, or those underrepresented in Converge, from ethnic minorities, refugees, LGBTQ and so on, homeless people, traveller communities. Each of those, technically and theoretically is possible, each presents challenges for Converge that need to be thought through very carefully. And finally, other professional groupings working alongside them, potentially community mental health team staff coming to some of our courses, working with medical students as volunteers and so on. So there's expansion in there in terms of different audiences. So what I've done here is really to set out some of the possibilities for the future of Converge in all sorts of different ways, both here in York and Northumbria, but also more widely in different participant groups and different subjects and so on. Harriet's now going to talk for a few minutes about issues that came up in the evaluation related to ethos and leadership. So over to you.
Thanks again, Nick. So, yes, I probably wouldn't say issues, I suppose, so much as points to bear in mind that came across as really, really key in our data findings. So our respondents who spoke about the future of Converge across all the different options that Nick has laid out. So just to recap, growing within the 2 universities, growing in York and Newcastle, developing new courses, developing new participant groups, expanding online, and or expanding into other cities, respondents almost always framed these suggestions with one really, really clear point, and that was that people across all the groups we spoke to, so university students, Converge staff and external partners, are all really keen to see Converge grow so that it can benefit more people, but only with a really, really careful attention to maintaining the ethos and values that Converge currently work by in both cities. So, when we asked people to define Converge and what their perceptions of it are, these are the kind of words they came up with. So you can see person-centred, community-focused, creative, focused on skills, equal access, supportive, inclusive, welcoming. And for those of you who maybe know Converge a little less well, hopefully that has really come out today so far, that there's a really strong thread of those values across delivery. And our research participants, again, across the board, but particularly external partners and university staff who are really well versed in seeing organisations ebb and flow, really stressed they wouldn't want Converge to grow in a way that meant either that this ethos was diluted in any way, or that Converge overstretched capacity, so took on more than they could manage. And in that context, something that also came up a lot in the data was around how Converge is led, both at York St John and Northumbria University. And just a note to say, the two programmes, as many of you will know, have really strong similarities and also differences, not least because the Northumbria programme has run for much less time, I believe 5 years as opposed to 14. So it's at a much earlier stage of development and sort of funding infrastructure, and has much less of that general infrastructure in place. So in terms of kind of leadership planning then, again, a slightly off-putting phrase, but really, really important. It's probably not a surprise to hear that Nick, for all his youthful looks and his constant cycling, will at some point probably want to step back or step down. And this was something that our research respondents brought up quite a lot, was a sort of a worry, I suppose, of, this is a really well-loved programme and a well-loved leader, and what comes next? So it does present a challenge in that respect. How do you replace someone who founded something so successful, but also an opportunity to say, what does Converge as a community want Converge to be and to do in the future? And equally at Northumbria, where people also told us how much they appreciated the warmth and dedication of the team, so especially Ali Hunter-Byron, the main coordinator. What are the key things it should focus on next as it comes out of a pilot stage? We're kind of in a transition phase at the moment, really, to something more long-term. And how does that community want Converge in Northumbria to be led to make sure that those things happen? So that shared ownership is really, really key. I hope it's evident to everyone here that Converge isn't made up by the people who run it, but although that leadership is really key, but by the Converge students, university students and partners who make up its community every day. So in reporting our findings to you today, hopefully you can see there's this wealth of options for Converge to consider in the future, but some form of prioritising them is going to be necessary. There would be risks attached to growing in all the ways we've laid out, all at the same time. So we're going to end this session then by going back to our snazzy smartphone polls and asking you in the audience, if you would like to tell us what you think would be the single most important way for Converge to grow to focus on. And one of the options is, I don't want it to grow, I want it to stay the same. So if you just have a think about that for a moment, I will get the Mentimeter site up with the code on it again. We'll leave that poll running during the break, so if you're not quite sure, feel free to take your time with it. And we'll then revisit it at the start of the next session, which continues this discussion around the future of Converge, but this time from the perspective of all those different people who use it. So a large panel of guest speakers, Converge students and university students. So I will get that slide up now. Please bear with me. I quite like this one because little dots fly around, you'll see. So the code is the same as before. If you go to menti.com, the code is 29202780, and it's up there at the top. I will just run through, because they're a little bit small, apologies, the text has come up quite small. There we go, got our first dot whizzing across. See, isn't it great? I love it. So the options are, if Converge were to grow in any way, which one type of growth is the most important to you? The first being, top left, within universities, so growing within York St John and Northumbria. So examples might be working within those universities, but with other schools, with other, say, alumni teams offering slightly different things. Growing within York and Newcastle, so maybe new partners or new venues. Growing in other cities, geographic growth. Looking at access, so online and postal delivery. New courses, growing the range of courses available. New participants, working with new kinds of people. For example, Nick mentioned expanding the work with people with dementia. Or no growth, I want it to stay the same, which is absolutely valid as well. So feel free to carry on doing that. The final thing I want to say is anyone in out of character or in the moment who would like to be part of a group shot, if you would be able to come up to the stage once the break begins, Sue, our lovely photographer who's waving at the back, will do that for you. No pressure, but anyone who would like to, please do feel free to come up on stage once everyone has gone off to the break. So have a lovely break, have a think about this question, and we will see you back here at 3:30. Thanks, everyone.
Welcome back, everyone. Just to introduce myself, I'm Matthew Rees, and I'm Director of the Institute for Social Justice at York St John University, and I've been a member of the design and delivery group on the Converge evaluation project. So I've had the pleasure of following along the project without doing any work whatsoever, which was just joyous. So it's my job to chair the largest panel I've ever chaired before in my life, which is less joyous, but I'm sure we'll manage. So this is the Future of Converge continued. We have on stage Converge students, York St John students who've been Converge volunteers, and we've got some, although not all, of the respondents from the different sessions throughout the day. So a range of different people who've engaged with that as we've been through. So quick kind of reminder, we've got a large group. If everybody could wait till you get a microphone before you talk, because it picks it up for the videos and so on. And we haven't planned anything, so we're just going to sit here and see what happens. But we have on the screen behind us the question which people were asked before. So I just wanted to invite the panel to kind of look at the dots and the numbers and the percentage and see if there's anybody who'd want to take that brave step of being the first person to speak and say something about, either what you think is seen there or what you think that next single one most important thing for growth and development is. Sorry, I don't know his name either, so I'm just going to say you. Just grab a mic. And if we just pass the mic along, that'd be great.
Hello, does that work? Yeah, good. So, I'm Steve Wright. I'm a psychiatrist. I've worked in York in early intervention, but I'm currently supporting a team in Scarborough, Whitby, Rydale, and I work in Tees, Escombe, Ware Valleys. But I also have a role in as the mental health lead for the integrated care system and as the regional collaborative for transformation, community transformation, which is very relevant to some of this. So I've got a couple of observations really, because I've noticed that first of all, strengthening the work within the cities has come out on top. It doesn't have any mention of rural populations or other areas. And I think cities don't live in isolation, but I do understand why that focus might be. But I think it's important to recognise that actually the universities take people from the more rural areas around as well as just the city. So that's one point. And I guess the other one is around how important the opportunity is to be developing the community resource within the cities in York and Newcastle and elsewhere. I know that's something that Joe particularly has been working very hard and locally on the Connecting Our City in York, and similar projects that are going on across the country. And some of that has come from the work that's gone on in York with the Trieste collaboration and the International Mental Health Collaborating Network, where Converge was something that was really, we were able to offer as a fantastic, innovative, homegrown opportunity for, as an example, really, of what can be achieved within with a university working with along with health and local authority to try and to demonstrate integrated care. So that's my observations, and I probably won't have to say anything else for the rest of the hour now, will I? So.
Hi, thank you. I'm Michela Mazzei. I'm a senior lecturer at Glasgow Caledonian University, and I was leading on the, I was presenting and responding to one of the sessions about co-production and collaboration. But looking at this, although they have been presented as sort of different options for growth, I wouldn't necessarily see them as being mutually exclusive. There could be a sort of, while recognizing that 30% of the respondents, I guess it's 30% of the respondents anyhow, might be inclined to grow within York and Newcastle, that doesn't necessarily exclude the potential to grow by perhaps opening up to new participants, or indeed looking at other cities as well. There are different models, essentially, different relationships that will be formed with different partners. And so they're not necessarily mutually exclusive.
I'm sorry I'm nervous, but I think for me, I started off, there was the coronavirus and it was online and it's 10%, but for me, I didn't, the confidence online is important, and then engaging in face-to-face and groups within Northumbria, but being able also to do Converge Connected for me is good. That Northumbria, the partnership between Northumbria and York University, York St John's, has really helped me develop and sort of get confident in my I would have never done anything like this. 2 years ago, I was online doing a drama course, and so online is, I know some people don't like online, but I think having a bit of both really works. So, thank you.
Hello, my name's Chrissy Bonham from Sheffield. So you'll not be surprised that I put that I wanted to see things like this in new cities. I think we definitely need something like this in Sheffield. And as some of you have heard, I am associated with the Story in Sheffield project, which is like a tiny little version of this. But I think we should have Converge in every city and rural areas, as you've mentioned. I would also really like to see it working with new participant groups, particularly, as mentioned there, people with dementia. I think there's great scope for, educational opportunities to be rolled out in areas like that, and it's something I'd be really passionate about. Oh, we've got one here. Sorry.
Is that working? Oh, God, yeah. I'm Michael Cunliffe. You may have seen me talking earlier. I'm from an art studio for people with mental health issues. And what really strikes me is this desire to grow within the co-locations, to deepen those roots, to stretch out to other venues. And I think there is a question, and possibly an ethical question, around how Converge interacts with other art for mental health or learning for mental health facilities that are out there. So the Recovery College model is one which is very present in Newcastle, which is of a similar vein, but without the university backing, essentially. So the question then becomes, when we're looking to bring down barriers and get more participants in, I think there's in some ways a positive barrier in the existence of the university. In a Converge course, you are coming to university, you're becoming a university student. There is a freedom and an element of that which goes beyond, for example, coming to an art studio because you have a mental health issue, and it's just people who have mental health issues, or going to your local community centre through a social prescribing scheme. But all of these things come close to each other. So I think there's a real question to be had there about what Converge is, how we preserve its integrity, and how it works alongside those other offers that are out there. Because it is something different, and it is something unique, but it must, I think, complement those other systems that are out there. So.
It'll get there. Hi, I'm Joe McKayley from the council and the head of communities there. I'd voted for new cities, but I'll try and make 2 points. So York is as Steve was saying, but is also a member of an international movement called Cities of Service. So that's roughly 300 cities globally that are seeking to build more trusted relationships between city leaders and the citizens that we are meant to serve through more collaborative relationships that are more person-centered and human. See the links to Converge. So I think there's enormous potential for Converge to grow, not only nationally, but internationally. And if you bear in mind we're coming out of COVID and going into the cost of living crisis, why we're going to need it to work in a more human and person-centered way. But then at the same time, as you were just saying, there's the need to embed the ethos, the principles and values of the approach. And a part of that is about leadership. Because if you haven't got traction within your system, you can be vulnerable. And a key part of that is leadership and operating generously. We're all going to be facing some challenges, as I've just said, and we all need to learn together. And Converge offers enormous opportunities to learn. But I would say sometimes it's better to be a part of an international movement because you're safety in numbers.
So my name's Leon. I run a couple of community creative arts organisations in North Yorkshire. And I think for me, one thing that strikes me is that the places I work, Knaresborough, near Harrogate, and Bentham, which is way up in the wilds of North Craven, are a long, long way from universities or university cities. So talking about the benefits of Converge and the Converge model to us, I've maybe got a slightly different take on it. A couple of things strike me. One is that kind of conflict between, do you stay local and go deep, or do you go wide and risk becoming a little bit shallower? And I think looking at Converge and what works for me is the fact that it is so important to York and the people of York, and how much more work there is to do in that local setting, but that actually what it, for me, it could really share its knowledge and skills is in sharing that model and way of working more broadly. And in one sense, yes, you can recreate that in other university towns, and yeah, wouldn't it be great if there was something like this in Sheffield and Hull and every other major city around. But what concerns me is, how do you get the value of what Converge and the university model does to reach out into places like North Yorkshire where there aren't universities? So you've got creative arts organisations that do a great job. They know their locality. They don't want Converge stepping on the toes, but they do want Converge coming in with the skills and the knowledge and the learning that maybe we don't have. So that ability to do really intelligent partnership work is really important to me.
I think I've already got a mic on here, maybe. I'll just talk. I'm Meg. I'm a university student here, and I'd just like to follow on from the things you were saying. Although I voted for new participants, but I do believe it is important to get something like this in more rural areas, despite it being important to continue the work here, because where I'm from, in Teesside, although there is there's like art studios and like dance studios and things like that, there's nothing that particularly targets people who are struggling, and they're mostly, I'm going to be honest, for profit or just for competitions. So I think it is really important to try and get, not necessarily taking Converge, because it is important, like you said, to keep the meaning of Converge so important, and like not to stretch it everywhere just for the sake of it. But I think the rural areas do need similar things, so maybe it is a case of taking things we've learnt from Converge into more rural areas, because there's a big lack of it. Yeah.
I'm a student, Converge student from Northumbria. I couldn't vote on there because my option that I wanted to vote for isn't represented, I don't think. But going on to Leon's point about expansion, do we go wide or do we go deep? And I would like to deepen the Converge experience to grow loyalty and grow the community. So, for example, for me, because I'm autistic and my social phobia is this high, so I can access Converge, but I can't access other mental health arts charities because Converge seems to have what I need, which is really hard to specify. I know we've all been trying to, explain what is the essence of Converge. But for me, I would need something like some Converge sessions which are not necessarily university learning, more slightly less structured sessions where we can learn to socialize and have friends, because I don't know how to make friends. There you go.
Part of mine is, sorry, Kat. Part of mine is also to like follow on that, because I've got a 16-year-old grandson who suffers really, really badly with mental health issues, and he's not been at school for 2 years. And I don't want to make it a personal thing, but he's really interested in music productions, but there's nothing that provides it. All he'll get is counselling, and it's like all they want to do is ask him questions. The state his mind's in, he can't answer any questions. He just says, I don't know, to everything. And there's nothing, and it breaks my heart. And I just think he's not going to be the only one. There's got to be more kids out there that can't go to school because their anxiety won't let them, because there's too many people there, or, kids are horrible, whatever. But I think Zoe's right as well in the deepening, because you've got to build up the trust and relationships with people before you can take it otherwhere. Because if you can't take it somewhere else, yeah, you might get the right people to take it there, but if you haven't got the right formula to give them with those people to show what it's about, then it ain't going to work. Do you know, it's going to disband within months, and then everybody's going to be really down because they're going to think, what can they do next, sort of thing. But yeah, deeper and younger. But, you've got places, kids that should be a register. I don't know. I'm just so passionate about getting kids into it and getting Converge known. Do you know what I mean? You talk to people, nobody knows what Converge is. Why? They know what the universities are. They know where the schools are. They know where swimming baths and football ground are. Why don't they know what Converge is? It's so important. And it's like relationships. I did online courses, and I met Yvonne, and I met Zoe and Kat and Ali and that lot on this online course. And they're all the way up there, So it's like, why can't it be done? I don't know. But yeah, you can have it now. What?
Thank you. That leads quite well, because, I think what I really wanted to do was turn this around slightly. So we've had a question about how do we bring some of the benefits to rural communities. We had a question about how we, perhaps as a art mental health charity, become more accessible for people who don't deal well with the way we do things. And that question of how we reach younger people. And I think in many ways those are questions for Converge students. You came in, you've experienced what it is, you've got those beginnings of skills, and I think the real question for Converge has to be, how do we enable you to come up with those programs you want to see? So if any of you've got ideas about how to reach rural communities or work with younger people, I'd really be interested in hearing them.
Put a bus on. Get a bus on, you can go from York to Northumbria, Newcastle and all that lot, and Teesside and everywhere. York, Converge, go up there. They come down here. Go somewhere else. I don't really need that, but okay. It's just, I'm sure that there's enough funding somewhere that can give us buses. We could go out and go to bloody Seaside and do it on beach. Do you know what I mean? pop-up theatres, stuff like that, art classes, workshops, LED windows, all the stuff we do, most of it even, you don't need anything that's majorly expensive equipment except for like the photography stuff and that. But you can take your camera out, you can take your phone out, can't you? But I think buses is a good way to go because you can go out, we can go to schools and let them know what's in store for when they're older. Go to colleges, just anything, shout off street corners. Can I take this home? That might work.
You've been waiting to speak. Kat, go ahead.
Yeah, so I was just going to say, similar to what Zoe mentioned, so I'm Kat, I work at the Northumbria Converge. And I think I love the idea of expanding, and I think you can apply this to many different situations, rurally, with different groups and stuff like that. But I think especially in Northumbria, we're still very new, so I like the idea of further embedding before expanding. You know, we're only about 5 years old, and a chunk of that time was in COVID, which is not something that we've had to deal with before, and it's hard to expand when you're dealing with something so global. But as well, the access options in terms of online and postal courses, that's something that we really took advantage of and kind of re-skilled ourselves in. And I think through doing that, we managed to reach a wider group of people than we normally perhaps would have. And that's something that we've really learned and that we want to kind of keep doing, as well as our in-person courses, because we've met so many like fantastic people through that. So maybe that would help, you know, be an answer in terms of reaching further people. You know, you have Converge Connected, where we're reaching people in many different cities, all doing the same thing, with a cup of tea in our living rooms, which I think is lovely. But yeah, I really like the idea of further embedding. I want to get a bit deeper before we spread out a bit, if that makes sense.
Hi, I'm William. I'm a Converge creative writing tutor, and I've also studied here as a creative writing student. And just wanted to follow up on what you just said about Converge Connected, because that proved so valuable to people. And for example, the postal version of a lot of courses was great. People love getting something through the post and working through the materials we send. And also, you cannot believe the treat it is to be sent writing back as a tutor and opening up amazingly talented people's work. And the only other thing I wanted to say was that having been in a lot of workshops as a degree student here, and then in workshops with Converge students or classes with Converge students, often the Converge classes are like very high quality, like MA or MFA workshops that I was in, just consistently, excellent work really being done, and that's, I think, as tutors, that's what we're aiming at. Is like, it's like Nick says about this is like always remember this is an educational program, and we're aiming to high quality, just try and get better and improve the quality of our teaching, which isn't brain surgery really. It's, that's what we're trying to do.
I don't know. Yes, it is. I'm Phyllis. I was a student volunteer last year with Converge at Northumbria, but I'm moving to York St John this September. Ooh. I think, I guess slightly selfishly, I voted for bringing more groups of people. I think the way Converge could potentially keep on student volunteers and keep them interested is finding other things that they're interested in. I have a interest in learning disabled theatre and working with people with learning disabilities, and I think Converge would work perfectly with that. And I think it's sort of finding the things that your university students are interested in and your Converge students are interested in that aren't necessarily the art forms, but like the personal things that they're interested in, and then expanding on the knowledge that those people have in those areas and allowing them to further their skills through Converge, but also widening Converge's reach at the same time.
So I think everybody on the stage has had a chance to speak. So could we have the audience house lights up a little bit, because we're getting blinded up here. So lots of really interesting thoughts, and I think going back to Nick's comment earlier about partial responses, and I think it's driven by people's energies and interests and those, and that's completely appropriate. Thoughts there, I think, really interesting about how do you broaden the leadership of Converge, maybe to include Converge students and so on in that more. But could we also maybe then have either responses or questions from the people in the audience as well? A reminder, there should be 2 roving microphones around. Please wait to speak until you have a microphone, because even if you can shout, it will be picked up by the video. It's much better if you talk into a microphone. So does anybody have, there's one at the back there, either a question or your own response to this question of the future of Converge.
Hello. That's loud. I just wanted to kind of add, something that I think could work is maybe partnering with colleges, because obviously a lot of colleges offer higher education courses, but they're still they're the campus-based kind of that bridge in between secondary education and higher education. But I think that's a possible route to be able to target more rural areas, because obviously you've got way more colleges than you have universities, and especially maybe using York as one that is quite established in York, taking that and trying to expand out with colleges further around York and Yorkshire might be a way to just trial kind of expanding further into rural areas.
Yeah, hello. I like to see Converge working with people with Alzheimer's and dementia and learning difficulties, because I think they would all benefit, and it's bringing the community together, all the different sectors. Thanks.
So one thing I think is the way I kind of maybe put myself into Nick's shoes is there are so many options and so many possibilities you could do. So maybe rather than accumulating more things for Nick to do, what in making the decision about what area, what should be the deciding factors? What's the kind of key core ethos or criteria or element that people, amongst all of these huge range of choices, what should be the thing that is held most in whoever's leadership of Converge's mind? So Steve, did you?
I've been involved with Converge for many years. I'm a teacher here. And I was talking with someone early on in the break about my idea that people with mental health problems and people with dementia and so on, who form communities like Converge, have a lot to teach the rest of the world. We have a lot to teach the established communities through our struggle and through our difficulties and through our through our need to be part of a community, and Converge has given us that ability to be part of a community so we belong. We have something to give the world, really important. And I've always felt that this is a fantastic opportunity for ordinary mainstream societies to see our point of view and to see that we have a lot of unique things to contribute to the world. So I think that's what I find very exciting about the whole project.
I can't see the order in which people, so the people with the mics maybe can try and keep track of when people put their hands up. There's one down the front left here, certainly has been up for a while.
I'm a student here, it's my first term, but one thing that Nick was saying was Converge is a model, yeah? So it's basically a framework, and I think if you're thinking about rural areas, I mean, I lived in the outback, it's called Herefordshire, and I mean, it really is rural, but there are universities, there's a very good theatre, which is struggling, obviously, financially, like a lot of, I was going to say parochial, a lot of small independent theatres. But I think these things exist, and what they're not doing is pooling them together as a Converge community. So I think there are things in place, But again, it comes down to leadership and putting all the resources that are possibly in place, but having some sort of headship under a Converge umbrella that can bring these disparate groups together. And I think that way you have far more expansive pool of people with creative leanings and abilities. And then secondary to that, I think a lot of the problem is if you, say, have mental health issues and you're not terribly well, you know, diagnosed or whatever. I found Converge by mistake because universal credits were on my back during COVID and all the rest of it. I mean, it's just been crappy, but that's another long story. But I found it because there was a job going, and then I thought, I'll have a look at the website. And ultimately, I knew that I needed to be a student more than I needed any job. It's what I needed, and I've only been in York, 5 years, and it's not been great, I have to say. I managed to get sepsis within the first 6 months, then COVID, and then, you know, it's not been quite straightforward. But this community, and that's what it is, I think it's just magic. It's got something that you can't bottle, but you can share it, but don't lose what makes it magic. Because if you lose that ethos, you know, it's gold dust, this place. It's absolutely amazing. And I mean, I came from an arts background, but 20 years of the wilderness, and I'm just thrilled to be back with like-minded people who have gone through the trials and tribulations of life. And like your 16-year-old grandson, I've got an 18-year-old like that. You know, and I think there's going to be more and more people. I mean, I didn't know about it, and I used to live just off Gillygate. I mean, how ridiculous is that? That's like 2 minutes around the corner. Yeah, I wish I'd found you 5 years ago. So I'm pleased to be part of the family.
Yeah, Steve.
I mean, I'd just follow on with that. I think that's it is a really important point that we've heard previously as well about people not having heard of Converge and actually as a model. So I think actually, you know, one of the really valuable things is the people and the relationships and those principles that Nick highlighted as well in terms of how people relate and the language that's used so that's the point of having a model is that you can model those behaviours and those attitudes in the community. And I think that's perhaps, you know, one of the ways of going deeper into the communities that are around us. It's very hard without leadership and without opportunity to get deeper, but it's really important that whichever pathway that Converge, the level of awareness of Converge and also the message that it brings is more widely shared, because we don't know how many people don't know. It's back to Donald Rumsfeld and his unknown unknowns, I guess, but we do know that there are a lot of people who really don't get it, and that perhaps don't understand because they've not had the opportunity to observe those attitudes and behaviours and how extraordinarily supportive and developmental they can be for everybody who's part of it. So that's really just following on from that.
For me, the university when I was growing up was a very frightening thing, you know, the puppets, you know, that chatter in your head. And so Converge is, for me, it's stepping stones. Yet I agree with a lot of the points. So rural, not all rural communities, not everybody has internet, transport, so you could go wide, couldn't you? It's pretty in-depth of where do we go and how can it develop, and all points are really valid in what everybody's discussing. But I just feel postal, online, if people can, some people don't like traveling, but it's okay. Some people in accessibility, so it's a wide topic, and I hadn't really thought about it in depth of the future of Converge. And no, I'm from I do courses with Northumbria, and I do also, to expand is exciting, but maybe development is important too. So I would like to eventually continue with courses and then maybe get involved in steering groups, and maybe people who use Converge and students and volunteers coming together, tutors to sort of focus on where the future goes. In the research, I did some research, like part of the visual storytelling, in the confidence of a mature student coming back into education after a long time of diagnosis is scary, but that stepping stone of Converge is a life changer. So like magic it is, but it's how do you expand but keep the ethos? Is it the ethos? Yeah. So
had his unnegotiables earlier, so the things that cannot change. Can I ask people on the stage, whichever avenue of growth or change or future happens, what are the things that must not change? What must stay the same? What are those core ethoses?
I think it slightly connects the two, in that I think one thing that has come through really strongly today was the centrality of community to Converge, and how everyone who's spoken, participants, has been how important it's been to belong to something and to share, and then the importance of that. And in terms of when you start to think about Converge as a bigger thing, as an organisation, it's nothing more than the sum of its parts and the people who make it up, and how can you have a community of organisations as well as a community of people? Because it is really important that this, there should be a Converge in every town or every city, but it doesn't have to be this Converge going over there. It could be a community of organisations that shares in the same way that people within Converge share with each other. So it was just sort of understanding the idea of what community looks like at a larger scale, rather than thinking of Converge having to do everything. It can model how to be.
Meg?
Yeah, I was just going to follow on from that. For me, something I think that shouldn't really change is that people find it really important that, because Converge in York and Newcastle are on university campuses, all of the people who come to Converge, they don't just get the identity of a Converge student, they start to feel part of the wider university community. And for them that can be a really big thing, because universities, for some people, if they haven't had access to that throughout their life, they're like a really big scary thing that they otherwise thought they would never be able to be a part of. So I think it's really important that they still get to feel like they can achieve these things. So whether it's I think someone at the back said about taking it into colleges, so maybe it's people that don't usually get access to these higher education establishments, through coming to Converge, they start to feel part of that wider community, and it's really good for yourself, I think, to keep that as part of it. Not necessarily always in universities, but just, the value of them feeling like they can access higher education.
The other thing as well is I don't know what you lot do up there, but it's we have social nights as well, and we'll have quiz nights, and we use student union and do a open mic night and stuff, and it's just nice to get to, because when you're in class, you get your time beforehand and time after, but it's not very long before you're shoved out because next class wants to be in. Do you know what I mean? So it's when you have your social nights, you can really use them for what they're meant for. And we did a lot of it online, because the first ones I went to were all through COVID, they were all on Zoom and stuff. And it was really weird going to one in person last time, but it was really good, and it was just lovely to be able to give hugs out. But it's that, like you were going on about, like a community. It's like when we were kids, everybody was auntie and uncle, because the community wasn't just a community, it was a family. And that's what Converge is. It's not a community, it's a family. It's like it starts as a community when you first get in, but I tell you, it's family ties soon. It really is. And I think that's the important of the depth and the richness of Converge before spreading it out too thin. You know, you want to get that flavour, and you don't want to lose the flavour of Converge, and I think that's the scary thing.
I'm just aware there's a couple of people in the centre that want to ask questions, but there you go.
Yeah, yes, please go to the audience first.
Hello, my name's Yvonne. I've been with Converge Northumbria for 3 years. I agree with Zoe, Dawn and Kat about being deeper, and Steve. I think that the disciplines of Converge should be formulated to maybe 5 or 10 key points, and that's the foundation. You keep those as a model. Now, I voted for the schools, and while sitting here and listening, I think I've changed my mind, because it's taken it out from the university, like what you said, the experience. There's a lot of people might never ever use the word, have the vocabulary of university in their lives. So if it goes to the school under the umbrella of Converge, let it be a stepping stone for what's ahead. That if they do have mental issues at school for whatever reason, you can help, but they're still going back into the same environment. They're not going to progress, so we may be targeting a very young age that isn't ready to accept the concept of Converge. So I in my view, I would like Converge to strengthen itself, to get a good foundation, know exactly what you're talking about and what you want to achieve. What outcome do you want? And ask the people, the future students, what would you like to do with your life? What is it you want to achieve? Can you see yourself doing this? Like how we had the film about the pilot and that. So we're not dampening people who have dreams. We're helping them, and then that will help their behaviour, and also they will go on and do the talking to spread Converge. But I would like to see it grow, especially Northumbria, a little bit more before it's diverse with everyone else. Thank you.
I'm just going to build upon that. So hi, I'm Heather Simpson. I've been involved in Converge for a number of years in different ways. And a few things are real takeaways that I am listening to the different elements today is that one of the things as a Converge student that I hear is really valued is there is no timeline. There's no end point. And another word I hear over and over is deepening and belonging and community. And I loved on the video today, the Out of Converge video, the big pot thing when they were baking a cake or putting the ingredients in. And some of those ingredients were in that mix as well. The value of community. And then I hear today of you on the stage and the fighting and the social justice that and the destigmatization. So all of those to me is the magic. And for me, when I look up the list of growth up there, and it's just hit me when I've been listening today, is that they're all quite transactional growth. So like growing to more universities or more cities, growing the number of courses, all of them are hugely relevant. And actually, it was something, Zoe, that you said from Northumbria about you've been in place for less time than the York space, and you need time. And so there's not a one-size-fits-all for any of those. There's probably validity, particularly in terms of inclusivity of more rural areas, and perhaps, you know, recognising for some people online will be the best first step and maybe the only step. And there's huge validity in that too, and others it will be about physically coming somewhere. They're all right, there's no wrong, but for me I think the growth is in the maturity of each space. So really building upon what you just said is identifying those core ingredients, and the growth will be in those things becoming more mature, and then that might look different in York, in Northumbria, in the connected course, and anything else, and it enables new spaces to step up and start flourishing as well in their own time. And for me, that's the really big thing I've taken away.
Very much. I'm very aware of time, so I'm afraid that will have to be the last contribution. So I want to thank everybody on the stage for commenting and engaging. I'm sure there is much more to be said because there always is about the future, but thank you very much for everybody here.